Myrto Ashe. I'm a family doctor. I've been a family doctor for about 20 years. And I just opened a practice in Mill Valley doing functional medicine, which is different than family medicine, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm here to talk about the health risks of GMOs, and I specifically want to answer the question, are they safe to eat? So here's a quick review of what you just heard, actually. There's three main food crops in the US, and that's wheat, soy, and corn. That's pretty much mainly what we grow, and so it's pretty much mainly what we eat and what we feed the animals. The soy is almost all genetically modified, and the corn is almost all genetically modified. The soy tends to have the Roundup ready gene. Corn has both the Roundup ready gene and the gene that makes BT. Here are those crops, and you can see the one on the right. See those awful weeds? That's the problem, the weeds. So we spray glyphosate. And this is a sense of how much more glyphosate we've been spraying. Since 1990, we were spraying 5 million acres in the United States with glyphosate. Now we're spraying 140, and that's just the 2008 figure. So just to be clear here, Monsanto makes Roundup, Monsanto makes the corn and the soy, right? So this is an interesting business model here. Well, Monsanto is also affiliated with some of the pharmaceutical companies, but let's not get completely paranoid. So then when we spray, we get this, we won. See, this is what the point is. So I want you to remember these three remarkable facts. So the more I read, the more I thought, this is amazing. Our food supply is being actually taken over by GMOs. That's point number one, and that's going to help me answer the question of, are they safe to eat? Point number two is that glyphosate has been skyrocketing, as you saw. And number three is that the genetically modified corn is actually a pesticide. That's actually pretty amazing. They had to register it as a pesticide because it was making pesticide. So we're feeding this corn to all our animals, and then we go ahead and eat that stuff. How to decide? Well, I thought since I've got my three remarkable points that really impressed me, I went with those. Number one, is glyphosate safe? Number two, is BT safe? What kind of information can I find that as a doctor I can really hang my hat on? And number three, are they safe to use generation after generation? If they're going to take over our food supply, are they safe generation after generation? So the pesticide, I went back to the mode of action of glyphosate, and it's kind of interesting because it actually targets an enzyme that animals don't have. And so there was reason to believe it could be safe because it targets this enzyme in plants that helps make 3 amino acids that we don't manufacture. Animals have to eat them. They're essential amino acids. Unfortunately, that's not all glyphosate does, and this is where the problems begin. Dr. Don Huber is a plant biologist, and he was initially hired by Monsanto to help the farmers grow better crops using Roundup Ready Monsanto crops. He started pretty quickly making a little bit of a problem for Monsanto because he started talking about this manganese deficiency. So here, I don't know, it's a little bit of a schizophrenic article because it's kind of, it says take heart, and then it says there are non-target, far-reaching, so basically, I think Don Huber's starting to see this as a problem. And he's essentially telling people to use less glyphosate. You can't spray that much. The plants come out manganese deficient. And once they're manganese deficient, then the cattle die in utero. So this is actually pretty huge. Actually, it's becoming a very big problem with the farmers. Now these cattle, some of them are dying in utero. How are the others doing? The others are going to be our food supply? I'm concerned. So this is Don Huber again, and he's co-authoring an article in the European Journal of Agronomy. I don't know why it's not the American Journal, but anyway, where he says that the soybeans, once they get sprayed, sure, all the weeds are dead, the soybeans are alive, but they're actually very weak. They tend to come down with unusual diseases. They don't actually do the basic things soybeans are supposed to do very well, which is to fix nitrogen from the air. So they're just not very good plants, and this conclusion on this article is again the same thing, just don't spray as much. So I wanted to look for effects on humans. Okay, so now I know the plants aren't really very good plants, but what are the effects on humans of the actual glyphosate? This is a very pure study. They took human placental cells. This study was done in France. They incubated them with glyphosate. So what you see along the bottom is the concentration of glyphosate. And as the concentration goes up, this enzyme called aromatase, its activity starts to go down. Now what does aromatase do? It makes estrogen. Would estrogen be important for placenta to make? Well, I don't know. So there's a study in Ontario where they actually asked farm wives about their exposure to pesticides. And what they asked was, they actually took, there's 2,000 women or so, and they report on about 4,000 pregnancies and 400 miscarriages, more or less. And they asked them only, did the baby make it or not? They don't ask, did this baby have ADHD? Was it born with 2 heads? You know, they don't want to know any of that. Did it get leukemia? They just want to know, did it make it? And then they asked them, did they spray pesticide and at which point? In the 3 months prior to the pregnancy, in the first trimester, second, or third. The 3 months prior are important because that's when the egg actually develops fully. What they found is that the use of glyphosate within 3 months of conception, and that was the only link for glyphosate. There's a different link with some of the different pesticides, but this is the glyphosate link, causes an almost doubling of a late first trimester miscarriage. So somewhere between 12 and 17 weeks, the chance of miscarrying if you had sprayed glyphosate on your field 3 months before conception was 1.7, so almost double. So now to BT. We haven't done research on the BT that's in the plants, so we wouldn't know. But BT does, the regular BT, the one that's in the bacteria, kills caterpillars by damaging their intestines, and unfortunately it also does damage the intestines of mammals, so mice in this case. And intestinal damage really concerns me because it underlies a lot of allergies and immune illness and a lot of illness that we didn't think was connected, but now is turning out to be connected, and that's all over the regular medical literature. And unfortunately, Bt toxin was recently found in human blood by Canadians. So this is a study out of Quebec, and they looked at non-pregnant women, pregnant women, and cord blood from newborns. Umbilical cord blood, and they found some of the pesticides, they found some of their metabolites, and they talk a lot about glufosinate in there. Glufosinate is not glyphosate, it's also a pesticide that's heavily sprayed on GM crops, and it unfortunately targets an enzyme that animals do have in this case, the enzyme that helps us make glutamine. Glutamine is an amino acid, and glutamine is actually the most important amino acid that the intestines use to repair themselves. So I thought that it was kind of an interesting coincidence that you've got the BT that destroys intestines, and then you've got the glufosinate that makes it impossible to repair them. And here's my multi-generational study. There's in fact a couple of studies, this is from Austria, where they've taken animals and they've compared 2 groups of animals, one group that was being fed only GMO and the other group that was being fed non-GMO. And they only really started to find differences in the 3rd and 4th litters. But at that point, the differences were reproductive failure. So I actually, it becomes concerning because if they take over our food supply, then that's going to be what we live on. I guess we could become extinct. What's interesting to me in this study was what they said here in the 2nd paragraph. I put it in light blue. They would like some of the research to focus on genomic, proteomic, and metabolomic. Now, I'm sure no one here has heard of this. I hadn't heard of this until about a year ago. These are all new terms in the research. None of this even, I think, existed when GMOs were invented. There was no way anybody could do research on these. This is looking at how proteins are expressed, how genes function, things that we couldn't do. We've had the Human Genome Project. We've had all sorts of advances. In summary, well, I am not reassured. Of course, you knew I was going to say that. Plants are nutritionally depleted. You're buying something that's not nutritious, I think. It's not quality food. It results in poor quality meat and eggs and milk and cheese. Now the milk we know to buy organic, but the meat we don't, I mean the cheese we don't always think about. The residual pesticides are still present and they enter the bloodstream. And they're in the bloodstream, but we don't know what they're doing there because the studies are inadequate and the studies we do have are non-reassuring and they support a link between the diseases that are on the rise and the presence of some of these. So to me, this is not a proof of harm, but when I decide whether to feed my kids or not, well, I also want a proof of safety. The fact that there's no proof of harm doesn't entirely change my mind. That's it.